Before we begin, this video is sponsored by Sleeve Chief. You can find good quality accessories to make your deck and gear look good. Get card protector sleeves with artworks of all your favorite archetypes and cards for the main and extra deck. There's extraordinary border sleeves, and they've got you covered with deck boxes, playmats, and dice as well. Head on over to Sleeve Chief's website through my affiliate link in the description box below and use my code SHADOW at checkout to get 5% off your entire order. Let's begin. Hey guys, I'm Naya and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm joined by YCS winner, streamer, podcaster, YouTuber, and overall a very prominent name in our community. I'm joined by Pak, and we're going to discuss a bunch of topics. I'm very glad to have you here today.
Yep, awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. I'm excited to do this. I've seen you do this with a bunch of other players as well. So it's cool to be on. Thank you.
I appreciate it a lot. I'm really glad to hear that. So yeah, I prepared a couple of things for us to discuss today. But before that, I want to hear a couple words on your background when it comes to your competitive Yu-Gi-Oh background. So how you got into it, how you got interested and excited and all of that.
Yeah, so I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh at the end of 2019. I originally just started because just graduated college and my friend told me about this hobby and I decided to pick it up. Just because he was having so much success with it on the vending side. It's actually the owners of Gamer's Choice, if you guys know that. He was like a friend of mine who went to high school with me. I met up with him one summer, and he told me about the card game. I've always watched the anime, but I never really got into it, like playing-wise. So I figured, why not give it a try? So I still remember, like, in the early days, like, I was watching, like, Team Samurai X1, like, SEMO, because they had guides on how to build a salary deck, like a budget deck, because I didn't want to invest too much I didn't want to invest too much into the game, right? Since I was starting off at the time, so I watched those guys because they had videos on how to link summon. Literally, I had to watch a video on how to link
I
summon.
did the same thing with the Dino Structure decks.
Yeah,
like the exact same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone said that. I remember like at the time when I was watching those videos, they're like, "Yo, this is like the best time to get into Yu-Gi-Oh! You can like do really well with only $30." And ultimately this later led to the blow up series that I was doing. But yeah, that's kind of like how I got it. Ever since then I just became addicted, to be quite honest, and just fell in love with the game.
That's amazing. That's great. So you mentioned the balling on a budget. I mean, we can start with that. Like, I think your series is amazing, and it's just such a good way for people to just get a bit of an idea as to how it is to just start the game. Like, you don't want to throw like $500 immediately into the game unless you're like crazy or just very passionate. So what's your tips on like just getting started on a budget? What are some things you should be looking out for?
I usually look for a so like if I'm starting on a budget, I try to make the most out of my cards. So for instance, like if I only have like $10, I'm like, okay, what's the best cards I can get with only like $10 pretty much? So that's like, if you look at my series, that's essentially what I did for the majority of it. It's like, okay, I have $10 a week. What can I do with only $10? What's the most what's the most mileage I can get with XYZ cards, essentially? So I think that's like the best way to approach budgets. Decks. I think a lot of people typically buy and spend a lot of money on cards they don't really need, or it doesn't really advance their deck, but it's cool. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. So that's kind of like my approach on things. But I think it's a lot harder for newer players because they don't really know what's good and what's not good. And I think like that comes with time. Obviously, like with aspects of like deck building and all of that good stuff. But yeah, I would say overall, it's like if you have an XYZ amount of budget, it's like you just have to figure out like, okay, how much mileage can this much amount of dollars get me, and see if it makes sense, right? Like if you can't buy Thrust because it's too expensive,
right?
Is there a better alternative? But sometimes like really expensive cards aren't even like that great, anyways, right? Like I'll give the example of like Thrust, right? Like it might be like an $80 card, but it's not necessarily like a mandatory card in every deck. Yeah. There's there's a bunch of decks that you don't really need that card in. And even like examples of like Pot of Prosperity and like the Trap Trick deck, it's a really good consistency card. I would say like that's the card that I would save up for because I know that like it really boosts the consistency of my deck by a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But to be quite honest, like if you were to play without it, maybe you can substitute those 3 cards for something else in the meantime, right? So it's like, managing your finances that way. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I think those are all great tips. And I also,
Yep.
the way I view it is a lot of times I think it's important to invest in staples. Like, even if some of
Yes.
them might be a bit more expensive, like I remember at some point in time, Ash hit a high price point, even though it received some reprints, but it's still a card that you just need to invest into. You just need to like literally be like, okay, I need to do it, because at some point in time, especially if you know you're in it for the long run, you're going to need those cards. So you might like skip on a couple locals, or even skip on acquiring the first deck if you know, like I said, you're going to be in it for some time, and just acquire the staples and then build on top of that as well. So I think that's also important when it comes to the budget stuff. And like overall, like Pak said, adding on top of things, right? Or finding alternatives. Like you don't need to specifically buy prosperity in order to play trap tricks, but you can buy trap tricks and maybe even do well with it because the deck is nice. And then from like the price packs, everything that you get, just save up and build on top of your own deck. So I think that's really, really important. And we mentioned a couple different decks, and also if people look at your channel and all your streams and everything that you do, you tend to look at a lot of different decks, play a lot of different decks, and just have the ability to run all of them. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on how you approach like a deck, basically. Like, okay, I'm trying to learn a new deck. What is it that I have to do? Because a lot of times people are struggling with it, and maybe they try to, I don't know, learn combos by heart or something. It just doesn't work that way a lot of times. So what's your thoughts on all of that?
Man, that's a good question. I think the ability to play multiple decks, I think, just comes with understanding every time you pick up a new deck, like what its win conditions are, and trying to just constantly perform that win condition multiple times. So like when I was playing the hero deck recently that I tried out, I looked at every combo and I tried to figure out like, okay, there's a bunch of things you can do with Wake Up Your Elemental Hero, which is the new fusion that just came out recently out of the latest set. And that card tutors out any warrior monster from your deck, okay? So obviously there's a lot of things you can do, and there's a lot of combos people have been doing. And I think the way I learned the deck, because I had like basically a day to learn it before I took it to locals, was I was like, especially with the new Wake Up combos, they're quite different actually. But I was like, okay, what is the win condition of the deck, and what am I trying to do every time when I go first blind game 1, right? And after I guess understood that, I kind of just did it. I was just like, okay, like every hand that I looked at, that's what I try to figure out, like what can leads to what. And I think a lot of it just comes with like experience too. Like the more you play, the more you realize it's like every time you play a card, you should already have like things in mind of like what you're gonna do next if it resolves, right? Or if it doesn't resolve, like what would you do? Like have some sort of semblance of an idea. And I usually try to like only say like only think in like really tough spots. But most of the time, you should already have some general idea. Like, okay, this happened. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like do this and keep going, right? If this happens, or like you look at your hand, you're like, okay, there's either way I'm gonna get destroyed by Ash, so I kind of just have to like play into it. But what gives me the highest chance of where my opponent might not consider ashing or something like that? There are like some nuances with like, that kind of stuff when it comes to like playing. But I would say for the most part, like when you're trying to learn like a new deck or play multiple decks, it's that focus on the win conditions, and a lot of like I guess themes also apply for a lot of decks when you go seconds, like which card baits which interruptions. But and then another thing that I think also really helps is that as you learn more about the format, even like for example, I actually have never played Catch Steer this entire format.
Okay.
But I have a really good idea of what the deck does, and I know how to play the deck, even though I never played it. And I think that also comes with like when you watch other players play with the deck, you should really try to understand what they're doing. And as a result, you actually learn how to play the deck just by default, just by watching them play. And I think that's like super underrated as well. Because for me, like, I learned a lot of how to play a lot of other decks just by watching other people play. And then thinking about if what they did was right or wrong, or like more optimal or not. And then when I pick up their deck, I try to like, as a result, I try to like play better with it, because it's like, I think I see all the things they're doing and see the reasons why they're doing it. But I think in hindsight, like, okay, does it actually make sense? Why are they doing this, et cetera, et cetera?
I think that's
Yep.
great, honestly, like because a lot of times people might probably get discouraged when they pick up a new deck. And also you mentioned
Yep.
how important it is to have like an end game in mind, basically what you're
Yeah.
doing. But a lot of times what you actually see happen, people will maybe take too much time to make certain plays. Maybe the opponent even rushes them, then they get just flustered and nothing good really comes out of that. So sometimes I think it's just important to know for yourself that even if you take like an extra minute, maybe at the beginning of your turn to like finalize your game plan, there's nothing wrong with that. Like not every single person is going to jump to conclusions like in a matter of 15 seconds because we're not all built that way. So it's okay to take some time, figure out what you're trying to be doing instead of like throwing random cards at your opponent without like any idea as to what your end game is. So and also like you mentioned a lot of different ways of learning a deck, you know, observing people, learning the combos, and there's just a lot of things when it comes to that. You can literally like write stuff down if you need to. That's why people make spreadsheets and then people buy spreadsheets. It's like literally how it works. It's just very, very useful. So you probably should be learning the ins and outs of the deck, like the interactions even. Like if you remember a very important interaction and you see it come up a lot of times, just keep it in mind and think about it when it comes up. So I mean, but yeah, it's a lot.
I learned
a
lot just watching other people play, to be honest. Like there's a lot of like really good players that play, and I just like sit there, I watch how they play, and I'm like, okay, they did this probably because of this. Like, you know, you never actually really know what's going behind their head, but you can kind of infer based on like the, you know, the game state and the board, where like, okay, they're doing this, well, most likely because of this, right? like they're trying to play around that. That's why they, you know, special red first before they kept going, like trying to play around nib or something like that, or they make Gigantic under like on 4 instead of like special summoning Jet, right? Like an example would be like they go normal summon Beaver summon like, let's say, Angler, then they go special blue, they add Jet, and instead of specialing Jet right away, they overlay for Gigantic.
Yes.
They go Gigantic effect.
Yes.
But a lot of people see that and they're like, you know, wait, they're just kind of like, okay, like, you know, but if you think about the logic and the reasoning why they do like stuff like that, it's like, okay, they're doing it because they want to play around Nib, which can be a pretty common card in this format. It may or may not be in people's main deck. You never actually really know. But you know, there's nothing to lose from playing around it, right? So, but it's, and you can special summon Jet after Gigantic resolves. So it's that kind of like you know, thought process and really trying to understand what people are doing that will help you just learn the deck. Like it's not about just learning how to play the deck, because anyone can. I feel like most people can learn how to play a deck at the most like basic level, but I think if you're trying to like learn how to play a deck at the more intermediate advanced level, you have to not just like look at what they're doing, but like why they're doing stuff. And I think that will like help most players like grow and take it to the next level, to be quite honest.
I also think I heard you say it or read you say it or something that you like to read the feature matches that are posted on the blog, which is also a really good source.
Yeah, so when I first started playing the game, like the way I like, a lot of people were like, how did you get into the competitive scene like so fast? And I would say that like like the history was after I started playing like that Salamander deck.
Yes.
I obviously like did not do well. I lost at locals like so much, but afterwards I like became interested on like, okay, well, how do I get better? And one of the ways I did that back in then was I watch every feature match. I'm talking about like even old school ones, and I try to get into like the mind of like what they're doing, like why are they doing this, and I really understand. And I think that like helped me quite a lot. Even reading feature matches helped too. One of the things that top players back in the day used to do, and the reason why I know this is because I've talked to like Joe Girolando, for instance, and they would actually have these like websites like where they actually cover the feature matches, and they would read the 5-card starting hand of both players, and before they scroll down to see what the person would do, they would be like, okay, if I draw these exact same 5-card hand,
what would I
right,
do
in like code format, what would I do? Right? And it's like literally the difference between normal summoning like setting Spy or like normal summoning Kaiku. Like I'm talking about literally like 2005, 6, 7 formats. I think Chris Perovic has his own website on this, like metagame or something like along those lines. And you can still read them. Like they're insane. Like I've read some of the most like crazy 5-head like outplays, like literally like bluffing. It was insane. Because back then the feature matches were they actually wrote down. Sometimes they would write down like oh, this guy got like, this was a bluff. You know what I'm saying? They were like this guy set mind control, something like that, and he's actually bluffing. All right, and then they got like, it's insane. And so like so that's how I literally started to, I feel like, become more proficient, because I just did that with a lot of feature matches. And that's how I like when I was a new player, I still knew a lot of like the really like the top players like back in the day, because for me it's like quite fascinating to see like how you guys evolved and what the player base was like at the time. And yeah, like that's just, it really helped me a lot to improve, quite honestly. So like that's always my biggest advice to players. If they want to get better, just like watch people play, and really try to understand. I think that's why Twitch and streaming competitively has become like so popular and so important, because now like you have a lot of like really high level top players like sharing their games, which you didn't really have it before, like at least live. And you'd get those from like feature matches and all that good stuff, right? But there's not really a lot of interactivity on those like live streams. But now like on the individual streams, like with all the competitive players, like there's Jesse, you have like Joshua, like, it really does help, because if you're actually trying to improve, like literally just watching these guys play will make you just better, just because you literally understand so much more.
It's so valuable. It's actually amazing. And a lot of pro players started to create content, which is just literally a blessing for the community. And I think that's awesome, actually. So moving on from learning a deck to building one, what's your take on when you try to build a deck and you need to build a side, you need to build a main, you need to figure out the ratios? Like, just take me through the steps of what goes through your mind when you first pick a deck up. Yeah,
I think for side deck, I always think about my main deck, because it's a holistic approach.
Yes.
It's not just one-sided. It's not just like, oh, because a lot of people, the way they build their side, they're like, I'm just gonna stuff good cards in my side and just hope it works out.
Yes.
And at least like I know at the top level, a lot of players that I theory with, they spend a lot of time trying to figure out what cards goes in, what card goes out for certain matchups, and crafting a side deck from scratch that way. And the best way to do that is to think about, okay, what does my main deck lose to? Then you have to think about representation. So if I expect cash to be the majority of the format, and my main deck only has 6 cards for it, what's a comfortable number of cards I want to go to post side to be favorable in the matchup when the side deck comes in, right? And I think that like helps you craft like a pretty solid side deck. And then you can think about like what are cards that you're going to be taking out as a result. Sometimes you take a little bit of consistency cards because you're drawing 6. So even siding out one consistency card like doesn't really matter because you're drawing 6 cards. So like having that one extra slot for a non-engine is like more important, right? So like an instance would be like the best example I would give would be like, if Kashtira is like the most popular deck of a format, like I would expect to like at the 250th, for example, I would expect to play like out of 12 rounds, 4 of them, or somewhat like somewhere in like, or maybe 3 to 5, I would say, around like the 20 to 30% range. I don't think I'm gonna play like 12 rounds of Kashtira. Sometimes that might happen, but that typically doesn't. That's only like in like tier 0 formats. Like at YCS Past, I played 10 rounds of tier limit Ishizu.
That's cool.
That was crazy. But at least in the format, the 250th, I think it's actually interesting because I feel like the 250th was almost purposely designed to have a bunch of decks be quote unquote viable. Because it's an event that literally everyone in the Yu-Gi-Oh space is coming to. Like it doesn't matter if you played for 10 days or you played for like 10 years, like you're going to come to this event because it's you might actually be able to make history because, these events might be the most attended events, to date. Actually, it has the potential to be, right?
It's literally monumental.
Yeah, exactly. And London, there's no cap. And last I heard, there was like over 3,000 players signed up. So
seriously,
it might be 3,500 now.
That's wild.
And it's getting crazier by the day. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that don't you're gonna face a lot of Kashtira, but if you're only gonna you're gonna play about 30% of the time, which is a high number, then you should have you shouldn't go to a YCS paired up against Kashtira and like be confused. Like, you should literally be like, oh my, okay, yeah, this is like, that's good. Like, I'm happy to play this matchup. Like,
I'm prepared.
This is what I expected.
It's literally the rogue that slaughters you. Rogue, you're not prepared.
Yeah, it's literally the rogue decks. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's definitely a lot harder because most, like, most people don't have a lot of time to invest into the game to like know what every deck does, at least from a rogue perspective. But at least all the meta decks you should have some idea with, I would say. And yeah, like side deck wise, it's like, okay, so 30% of my games I'm gonna be playing against Castira. I'm gonna dedicate, like, let's say, 33% of my side deck to that, like 5 cards.
Yeah.
Because it's like I'm gonna be playing it the most. I probably want more cards for it than, like, let's say another deck, right? Yeah. And then you go down like the list of decks, and this is why like a lot of like, I think Jesse made a tweet on why he doesn't like diverse formats, because diverse doesn't necessarily mean better, because from a competitive aspect you only have 15 cards in your side deck, right?
Yes.
But when there's 10 decks in the format that you could literally get paired up against, it's like, what am I?
Yeah.
you need multi-coverage cards, which necessarily may not target a deck. So you're gonna have to you need to side more generic stuff that might be applicable into multiple matchups, and literally the best way to do that is write it down, right? For instance,
yes, for sure.
I'll give an example with, let's say, Dark Ruler No More, right? It's Sprite's been getting a lot of popularity recently. You had Dink and Fan been playing with it, he's been doing well. And you see YCS Peru being won by Sprite.
Yep,
it was a Sprite finals. So you can see that Sprite has become definitely garnered more attention recently. So as a result, I'm in the back of my mind, it's this is a deck that I'm gonna have to be prepared for now in my side deck, because I do know that a lot of players who might not have the most time in the world, they might just play those decks. They might just copy those decks, right?
For sure.
And that's totally fine. But as a result, I'm gonna be prepared for it. So I might side Dark Ruler No More. It's really good into the Sprite board. It's always been really good into the Sprite board.
Yeah.
And the only thing you have to deal with is a smashers. But if a lot of people do the combo where they summon to pseudo and semi-phase off double cross, then they get destroyed by Dark Ruler. But they have to do that because a lot of people are maining kaijus and lava golem.
Yeah.
And summoning to pseudo and semi-phase plays around that, right? And Dark Ruler No More is not really a popular card in the format, so they're not really going to be expecting that. And as a result, I can literally Dark Ruler them, which answers the full board, as well as they've already burned double cross, which is their back row, their backline defense. So it covers everything. The only thing they can possibly have left is smashers, but that's only if they hard draw it, because their jet should be searching double cross for the combo. But this is stuff that I think about. So I would say pay attention to the meta updates, see what people are playing, what they're doing, and craft the side deck that way, right? And Sprite has always been a popular deck. It's a deck it's a fan favorite deck, right? It's like Sword Soul. People are gonna play it regardless of the format. People probably never even sold their Sprite cards, quite honestly, from Pod, right? So as a result, it's a deck that if I get paired up against it, I'm not surprised that people are playing it. It's a solid deck. It's a very good deck. That's my approach to side decking. I probably want to have a couple cards for Sprite. It might not be the most popular deck at the YCS, but I might see about 10 to 15% of the time, right? About 2 to 3 games or 3 to 2 matches, and 3 cards in my side deck, 3 Dark Ruler No More. I'll be happy, And maybe Dark Ruler No More. Then you have to think about, does it have coverage into other matchups, right?
Yep.
And that's where you see okay, this card covers multiple matchups, and that will help you. That will give you some sort of comfort into other decks as well, so you're not completely blindsided if you play against something else. But I mean, Dark Ruler No More, you play against Sword Soul, the only thing left is Blackout. You know what I'm saying? It's not the worst. Essentially, is what I'm trying to get at.
No, it's very useful, but it's all of these conclusions are something, and I want to preface this, it's something you have to come to before you get to the actual event, because too many times you will see a person go into their side deck, and sometimes they'll even audibly say it, man, I don't know what to side against you, and I'm like, I mean, that sucks for you, right? It's you should be prepared, and you have to you can write it down, like Puck said. I think that's so important for going first, for going second against decks. If you don't really want to do it in your head as you're sitting there, just write it down and literally memorize it if you have to, because you are allowed to prepare beforehand and know what you want to be doing. And also in tandem with that, you probably should be thinking about cards that are going to hurt you, the most important tech cards. If Puck mentioned Dark Ruler or whatever it may be, Ash, Eclipse, we see all of these running around. And if you know that this hurts your strategy, you probably should have some kind of counter options for your personal choice for your deck to counter those cards. So at all times, you should be looking at the meta, like at every resource available to you, so you can make those choices.
Yeah.
So,
100%. Yeah. And obviously, like completely to also like on the topic of prefacing this, it's that, you know, this is something that you need a lot of, like, it's not like you need a lot of time, but it's a lot harder to do in practice in practice than it is in theory.
Yeah.
Obviously, all this stuff I'm saying, like, it sounds really nice and it's something you could definitely do, but it does take a lot of time.
Oh, for sure.
So like, you know, it's not but it's a good exercise. Like, I recommend people do it. Like, you'll see how much your performance at YCSs or even regionals go up by just if you just like you know, try doing this. Like, it actually makes like such a big difference because you play more games sided than not, right?
Yes.
Like, unless you get too old. But
then I guess our RP
more often than not, you,
yes,
like, you either go 50-50 or you play like, you know, 66% of your match sided. So it's so important.
And also, there's nothing wrong with, I think, when you look at a list from someone, like you said, you know, like people are going to copy Dinkham Pham's list. Yes, okay, they are, probably. But I don't think it's an issue if you look at a list to get a bit of an idea as to which cards can be included in the strategy that you're trying to play. But then you need to think about the event you're going to. Because if I'm going to locals, I will probably not copy it card for card and then face 0 Kashtira and just cry after I lose to Rogue. So, yeah, I think it's
that's
so
why, like,
important.
I never think when you go to like that's why I think regionals are really cool. I think like bigger tournaments are really cool. I think locals are awesome. I think like they're like amazing because they give you like a nice testing ground, and, you know, playing with people and friends is always a great experience. But when you play against people, you know, obviously you're like, it's like, you know, I know my local is full of Labyrinth players. My side deck is like 9 back row hate cards, but you know, realistically, but I think like for me, that's not a really good indicator of like how to like side deck, and I think that's where like a lot of the issues comes in when people have problems side decking, is because you know, they know what to expect. But like a lot of the skill of side decking comes in, and building and crafting one is like, what happens when you go to a regional where you don't know anyone there, or you go to like a YCS where like you're gonna play, you know, rounds and rounds of people you have no clue who they are, right? But that's exciting. I think like that's like the coolest part about the game, because it's like, you know, when you're at locals, it's like, I know I'm gonna play against Labyrinth round 1 probably, you know, or I'm playing against like Traptrick players, so it's like you can craft your side deck to beat them and whatnot. But that's not really a good indicator of how well you'll actually do at a big tournament. And then that's why like you should take opportunities to go to regionals or stuff like that, because they give you like a chance to play people you never played, and as a result you might actually learn a thing or two as well, because everyone plays a little bit differently, and you know, and all that good stuff. So I would say that's also like key. Like I think if you can like go to like these regionals and whatnot, I think that will help a lot in the long run as well.
I think that's also a great segue into our next couple of topics, because I wanted to talk about the mentality behind winning and behind losing when it comes to the game, obviously. So I really liked your episode of Balling on a Budget when you talked about losses. I think the mentality behind that is so important. So what's a couple of things you want to say about like basically just learning from your mistakes and just moving past that?
I mean, like, you know, it's so funny because like I'm pretty like I'm a pretty good loser, and I say this in the sense that like I would say most people get like really upset or whatnot, and for me, like, I'm like, it doesn't, like, I don't really get like tilted, I would say, that often.
Okay.
I think like I just try to like move on and like, do my best. Like I think like the first 4 YCSs, I think I literally bubbled in a row, 4 or 5 in a row.
Yeah, I think I remember
you know, that was like devastating. Yeah, because it's like, you know, you put so much time and effort, but like, you know, like, but you don't make it, right?
Yeah.
But I think the thing that I always try to do is, you know, after like, you know, you get really sad or whatever, it's like then you have to figure out like, okay, well, what could you have done differently? And I still think back to those like YCSs, and I'm like, I made like super small mistakes where it actually did cost me like the difference between like topping or not, right?
Okay.
So can I blame it completely on like just luck and whatnot? Well, not really, because it's like there's things that I still could have done back then that would have made a difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, those were like my second, third, fourth YSs in person ever. So um, also getting accustomed to like playing in person with a lot of players. So I would say that, like, you know, when I think back on it, it's like if there's things that you can still do better, like you can never really be mad that you lost, I would say, because it's like you still have ways to improve. And I think that's typically like kind of like my mentality. I always try to think about like what can I do differently, like even after like the game. But you know, it obviously like it takes like time because you kind of like have to have that kind of mindset, or else like it's gonna be really hard to get better. And so obviously a lot easier said than done.
For sure.
But yeah, like I think it's just like replaying like the games back in your head and thinking about, okay, like should I start it off differently? Would it have mattered? Does it even make sense? Like do that type of play? You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes it's like too outrageous. It's like, yeah, you can play around this one card, but you have to like do such a convoluted play that, you know, that you'll never actually really do. But it's good to know it for sure. But you have to think about reasonableness too. Like, you know, like probability, like, hey, what are the odds? Like that last card in his hand is this. You put him on having it. Like, and like that's why, like at the end of the day, it also becomes like a numbers game. And like, you know, sometimes you might not also like for instance, like I've actually only had one top 8 regional. Like I've played like 6 or 7 regionals. I've literally gone like X3, X2. Like I've only like top 8 one regional once.
An interesting fact about Puck.
Yeah, so I've literally topped one regional ever. Like which, you know, people are probably like, yo, like how's that even possible? But it's like, you know, when you go to like these tournaments, it's like, you know, like literally anything could happen.
Yes.
Like and like and I think like that's kind of like the mentality kind of like have. It's like, you know, it's, you know, it's fine to lose, like basically. It's like, you know, that's like the only way to like really get better at the game. So yeah,
I think it's also like very hard sometimes to come to terms with the fact that you cannot blame everything on either bricks, top decks, and just cheesy stuff like that. Because a lot of times you're trying to make yourself feel better and, you know, just not blame yourself because you would feel even worse. But it's something I had to come to terms with, for example, to just realize, okay, I'm playing, I don't know, a meta deck and I'm facing up against a meta deck. I made a misplay, that's why I lost, and that's why in the next round I was paired against this random rogue deck which just annihilated me with this one random card. And then I shouldn't be crying in a corner thinking, oh, they had this one card against me. I should, you know, tell myself, you misplayed in the last round, so it's literally on you. You could go on to play meta.
Yeah,
like that's just what it is.
That's happened for me.
Yeah.
Like I remember like I was at I think it was YCS Hartford. I literally finished day 1 X1. Like I had to win one day 2 to top. I lost both of them. But but day 2, the first round of day 2, I literally opened there's not a lot of time. There was not a lot of time, so there's definitely ways I could have played faster or scoop faster game 1 and 2.
Yeah.
But in game 3, there's like about like 6 minutes left on the clock, and I had Nib, Token Collector, and like one other hand traps. I was playing Predaplants, Despy at the time, against Sword Soul. So like, I was probably gonna like win.
Okay.
But I used my hand traps incorrectly to at a point where he actually resolved like Long Yuan's effect against me. And like I just like played my hand traps like incorrectly, but if I played it correctly, I would have won and just guaranteed top cut.
Yes.
But I lost, and you know, it's like, you know, you reset your mental and you played the last round. But at the last round of day 2, I played against someone who literally like super polyed my board, then OTK'd me like game 1 and 2. I just got 2 in like 10 minutes. But it's like, it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like I could have just, you know what I'm saying, if I didn't misplay like round 10, I could just easily made it. But then because I misplayed, I literally got paired against someone who was actually unable to make it. So he beat me and didn't top because of like, because you need a, you know, like at that event, like you need really good tiebreakers to top. So but yeah, it's just like, I literally like, yeah, I'll definitely not like, I wouldn't say I misplayed in that game. I literally just got like sacked.
Yeah.
But I literally put myself in that position in a
Yes.
way because I literally misplayed the round before and I could have just guaranteed it.
Yeah.
So that that happens,
Yeah.
and like, so of course, like of course I had to be the one that got super polyed for my life savings. But
of course, yes.
it happens, bro. It's like like sometimes you get more punished than others. It's like a humbling experience because I've seen my fair share of people who like literally they make a small mistake but never punish and just clutch it out anyways.
Yeah.
But it's like I feel like every time I make a small mistake, I literally feel like I always get punished or lose, which is like now I'm like way more like vigilant on making sure I don't make mistakes.
You just do not make mistakes.
Literally, like I've seen people get away with like 10 misplays, but I'm like, damn, I make one misplay and I lose the game. I'm like, damn. So yeah, I now do my best to like just not misplay, which is a lot easier, a lot harder to do.
Yes, easier said than done, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we talked about losing a bit. Now I want to end it on a positive note. So I want to talk about winning. I want to talk about you winning the Master Duo Invitational, which, congrats to you for that. That's great.
Thank you.
I also want to hear about your YCS win with Prank Kids, specifically because I love Prank Kids a lot, but also props to you for that. So just talk about your winning experiences.
I think like... So, I mean, the Master stuff was really cool. I was really glad to win that one because, like, I got to win with, like, one of my favorite decks.
Yes.
And I played against, like, like, Paulo, who's, like, very, like, just an amazing player.
For sure.
A really good guy. I've seen him at every YCS I've been to. So, I've been to, like, a lot recently. Maybe, like, I would say I've hit 11 recently or 10.
Nice.
I think I hit, like, double-digit YCSs recently.
That's so.
So... or like at least like event attendance, and yeah, I've seen him at every event, and he's a great player, and I always enjoy watching him play and seeing his approach to the game. So it was a really cool match, and I just got to do it with like one of my favorite decks of all time, Sword Soul. And I actually never topped the YCS with Sword Soul, and I've actually got 34th at a remote YCS with Sword Soul, and the other one I went X1 day one, and I overslept day 2 because it was a European remote duo event.
Yeah.
So I literally finished day 1 X1.
Oh.
And I needed to win one day 2, and I just slept through it. Nice. So that was rough, but it's like, okay, it came to Master, and I was like, oh man, that's gonna be sick. So I was excited to play that deck, and yeah, like it's just like really cool. I feel like I did some really cool plays as well during the tournament, which I think is. Which I was really happy about because I got to show some of like the stuff that like people don't normally see when you play Sword Soul.
Yeah.
And I think that was like really cool. But yeah, that was a great experience. And yeah, and then with Prank Kids, that was I couldn't believe I won, but looking back on it, it was like literally a deck difference. I just happened to have like the best deck in the room, which doesn't always happen at events, right? But it was like just like I just got really fortunate that I was testing with my friends, and it was a deck that I literally played for content. Like that's the part that people didn't realize. Actually played the Prank Kid deck for content at a regional, at a remote regional, and I actually made top 8 with that deck. And I literally just played it for content just because, and it made me like learn all the really cool plays with it and everything. And yeah, and then my friends were like, yo, I think that deck is like really good. You should play it for the YCS. And I was like, yeah, I mean, like I have practice with it, so I feel comfortable in playing it. And I didn't want to play the other deck at the time was like Tri Brigade. But the Tri Brigade Zoo kind of got, I think it got hit, or Dryden got banned, so it made Prank Kids a lot better.
Yeah,
it made Prank Kids a lot better for that one YCS because you didn't lose to Dryden Pass. Like they couldn't end on Dryden plus Revolt, so they only had just Revolt. But we played like Bell and a bunch of other stuff during the time, so it was like really good ways to like beat that. And then there's another hit I forgot, but because the Dryden got banned, it was actually a meta call at the time because Dryden getting banned means that people can't play around Nib anymore. Like, or sorry, people like would play into Nib more.
Yes.
But prank kids like had a really good way to play around Nib.
Oh, it was perfect.
With
it
like
was
double prank kids.
Amazing. Yes.
Yeah, and it had a lot of really good ways to play through hand traps. I would say like it was like the deck that played through the most hand traps because the hand traps that people were playing at the time were Imperm and Veiler. So almost all of people's hand traps were dead against me except for Ash Blossom. But Ash was really weak that format because it only like you only hit Fractal pretty much. Like there was like nothing good to Ash, and against Dragon Link, if you Ash them, you just like it just didn't do anything. I think Striker Dragon went to 1 as well.
Yes.
So Ash wasn't a card you'd even expect it to be in people's decks, but if it were, you play cards like Parallel Exceed to beat it. And then there's like stuff like Crow and whatnot. Like it was just like a really good deck that played through like the most amount of hand traps that made a board that like just beat every deck pretty much. And yeah, like I think like looking back on it, I didn't. So I looked back to my feature matches. I could have played. I still could have played better, which was the craziest part in my feature matches. So that was definitely like a cool thing to like do, like which like go back to your feature matches, watch them, see if you could have played better. And when I look back on it, there was definitely things I could have played better with. And I think like that's like a really cool thing as well, where it's like I could have like made a more optimal play. It didn't get punished, but definitely could have made a more optimal play. I remember like against Dragon Link in the finals game 2, there's actually a really cool OTK line that you could do with prank kids. That's not really common. But you get to OTK him with like the field spell because you can actually trigger it twice. Or like you could trigger like the reduction and like the attack gain, and you can make your Nibiru like 3500 and you could actually OTK'd. But I didn't do that. I kind of just set up double Butler instead, but there was a world I just went and killed him that same turn, like for instance, like because I was already playing into Nib, so if I get Nib I lose anyways. So it's just like stuff like that like is also like cool to look at. But yeah, no, I think it like it was like it was almost like it was Destiny, because I was grinding the remote duel scene a lot. Like I streamed a lot of remote duel locals. I played a bunch of remote duels at the time, and I think at the time I felt like I really put a lot of work in at getting better, and so it was just nice to have it culminate into like an actual win. And that was actually my first solo YCS actually. Yeah, which is quite crazy how that worked out. But yeah.
I think this is like the perfect ending to just talk about like grinding, literally. Like with these videos, what I'm trying to do, and with the guests that I bring on that have amazing insight, all I'm trying to do is just give a bunch of advice as to how you can like get better at grinding your deck and just testing with it, because it's so much easier to just pick up a deck, make a couple decisions, throw a couple cards in your side deck, and then just hope and pray for the best at the event. I don't know, I think like episodes like these are great. I'm so glad to have had you on today, and I think you gave a bunch of insight and a bunch of incredible insight and like advice when it comes to that. So yeah, hopefully you guys learned something from Pak, and if you liked him here, I would gladly have you back if you're ever in need of returning to the channel. I would love to host you. So you guys let us know what you thought of the content in the comments down below. I'll make sure to put all of Pak's information in the description, so make sure to check out all of his stuff, and of course like the video if you did. Make sure to check out all the other content, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.